On June 27, 1806, the small British force that had attacked Buenos Aires achieved total victory. Viceroy Sobremonte, who did not trust the loyalty of Buenos Aires people, decided to escape towards the province of Córdoba. Beresford did not send any troops to capture him. He believed that by allowing the Viceroy to escape, he would reduce the chances of someone more capable taking over the leadership to organize a resistance. By 16,000 hours of that day, the British general has established his headquarters at the fort. Prisoners were possessed, and after pledging not to join any future fight against the British, they were set free. The city's main buildings were occupied by the officers, and the rank-and-file troops were stationed at the Rancheria, the city's first theater, which had been transformed a few years earlier into a barrack after it was almost destroyed by a fire. The very next day, Beresford took the first steps to secure his conquest. His first objective was to procure funds and food to supply the fleet. The British had captured 430,000 pesos from all the public buildings. This amount was just enough to cover the cost of the invasion, and Popan had to put money from his own pocket to cover all the expenses. Messages were sent to the merchants welcoming them back to the city. They replied in kind and quickly returned to cash in this new and profitable circumstance. Key points in the city were garrisoned to enforce security. HQ was located at the fort with 400 men between Royal Marines, sailors and artillery. The rest of the soldiers were spread in a couple of checkpoints, 30 men at Retiro, 80 at the pier and 80 at the prison next to the Cabildo. Beresford's position was unfavorable. He knew perfectly that the Spaniards were going to notice, in a very short time, the weakness of his forces. Without reinforcement, a counterattack could easily expel his troops from the city. Many tricks were tried to make the British numerical inferiority less obvious. Troops were secretly re-embarked and then offloaded from the ships using different uniforms. Extra supplies were purchased, and the British troops were paraded constantly in a show of force. The very first few days were tense. The British feared that the popular uprising could happen at any moment. But by July 1st, it became obvious that a spontaneous revolt was not going to happen. Only strong leadership could foster it. After the initial fear was dispelled, Popan had enough time to start thinking about his personal profits. He wrote letters to merchants back in England announcing that Buenos Aires was a free city open to trade with the British commerce. One of those letters was forwarded straight to his agent in London requesting one of the items that was in very high demand in the city, silk socks. Meanwhile, the merchants that had traveled with the fleet got a juicy return on their bet. They sold all their cargo in a few days with profit that passed the 250%. On July 3, the British secured control over the fort at the Ensenada de Barragán, which was going to be their retreat point in case they had to escape from the city. That same day, news arrived to Buenos Aires that Sobremonte had been abandoned by his escort and that he had to leave behind the city's treasure at Luján. William Pius White acted as a guide for the British, who quickly sent troops. After arriving, they quickly found the hastily buried treasure. After a few days of digging, they collected more than 600,000 pesos, 71 silver ingots weighing between 22 and 45 kilos, and 72 copper ingots. Meanwhile, Beresford was handling the political side. His goal was to dispel the citizens' fear that the British were there to convert them to Protestantism, free their slaves, or to take from them their private property. Beresford launched a proclamation, reassuring the British respect for private property and opening the commerce, which until then had been monopolized by the Spanish crown. The proclamation was very well received by the locals. By July 7, all the members of the public administration and the priests had pledged their loyalty to the British crown. By the 10th, the invitation to pledge loyalty was extended to the private citizens. Around 58 people of the local elite complied. The events of the first week of July seemed to suggest that the British control over Buenos Aires was getting stronger with each day. The high-class families opened the doors of their parties to British officers, who felt very welcome and attracted by the beauty of the local girls. July 13 was the high-water mark of the British expedition. From Lujan, 19 carts arrived with the treasure. In total, the expedition cashed in 1,250,000 pesos. Byrd, in spite never setting a foot in Buenos Aires, got 23,000 pounds, while Beresford, who was promoted over Popham by Byrd, got 11,000 pounds. Popham only got around 6,000. This setback only fired up Popham's ambition and his desire to invade Montevideo. He started frantically sending letters to the admiralship demanding reinforcements. The rank and file, on the other hand, only got 18 pounds for their victory. Once stability was achieved, the British started planning a defense in case of an attack coming from Montevideo. The HMS Encounter, the transport Walker, and a couple of minor ships, captured from the Spaniards, start patrolling the coast of Colonia, the most probable point of crossing of an army coming from the Banda Oriental. The rest of the fleet mount a blockade, capturing any incoming ship inbound to the River Plate. The HMS Leda finally joined the fleet after arriving from Santa Catalina. On July 19, the HMS Narcissus left the River Plate en route to Great Britain, carrying in its cargo hold the captured treasure and private unofficial letters asking for the much-needed reinforcements.